I want to make the case for the best Mario game ever. And as someone who grew up with this franchise, and I think if you were a child of the 80s into the 90s, Mario really was, for many of us, our entry point into gaming. One of the most iconic franchises, perhaps the most iconic franchise in video games. And throughout the years, I've played just about every major main release in the series, as I think many of us have. This is a franchise that you don't tend to give up on. And for so long, I would say if you had asked me what's your favorite Mario game, my response would have been Super Mario World or Super Mario 3. But with some hindsight, kind of looking back on my enjoyment of the series, I can say that that is not the case. I think the best Mario game of all time is Super Mario 3D Land for the 3DS. I realize it's not a popular opinion, but I want to make the case for this game. And I just recently returned to it just because I was playing the new 3D All-Stars, and something in that game just made me feel like I gotta put the 3DS, turn the 3DS on for the first time in a while, and just wanted to return to this because I was enjoying playing Mario. And what I found is a game that is incredibly well constructed. I think it is the most creative Mario game that they've ever made. Why? Well, because they accomplished something that was totally unique, and that is to design levels with the 2D Mario playstyle in mind. And in fact, many of the visual cues and the visual aesthetic from a game like Super Mario 3, Super Mario World, arguably some of the Game Boy games, and put that into 3 dimensions. And so when you play this game, you have this amazing creative effect where, as a kid, you were running across, say, level 1-1 or 1-2, and you would ask yourself, man, if I could only go into that world, what would it look like? And that's what 3D Land accomplishes. It takes that 2D linear course and turns it, and you can view it in 3 dimensions. And it works from a gameplay standpoint. It's not strictly a gimmick, where I think if you turn the 3D off, you're losing, I think, a good 20% of the experience with that game. There are certain placements of objects where you really have to see that world in 3D to make the jumps and maybe get that extra third star or something like that. And as you play through this game, and I would encourage multiple playthroughs, and you really have a chance to kind of get over the initial playthrough where you're just experiencing the level and learning the level, and then going back and appreciating the nuance of that level. You will see that, and I know it sounds corny, but it's kind of a labor of love. Somebody really loved those 2D Mario games and tried to get you to see that world in a different way. And of course, you have to go after the flagpoles. There's a timer. There's that appeal to skill that the first games, the earliest Mario games had, that were arguably lost with the 3D iterations of Mario, where you could just boost your life up by getting a coin. And that doesn't bother me, but it just works so nicely. The aesthetic, the pacing, the design choices. It's not to say that the game is hard. I actually would say it's one of the easier Mario games, but that doesn't really bother me these days. I think, the easier versions of Mario are, at this point in my life, in my 30s, actually relaxing, where you can kind of enjoy the world. There's not that pressure necessarily to make the most precise, perfect jump. They give you if you die 5 times in these games, you get the kind of magical leaf that makes you invincible and gives you the Tanuki suit power, where you can kind of float through the level. That doesn't bother me. In fact, doing that gives you a chance to maybe explore some aspects of the level that you wouldn't normally do. The game is on the shorter side, and famously there is, I don't want to give any spoilers, but there is a moment of progression in the game that kind of expands it in a way that is unexpected. So if you're enjoying the game, and when I first played through it, I was a little disappointed that, man, in the course of a day, an evening or two, I got to the end of the game. And in fact, I put it down for a little bit. It was like, I'm enjoying this game too much. I don't want to have it end in a weekend. But as you kind of finish the main story, the game opens up in kind of interesting ways, and it does offer a lot of replayability. Now, I think another testament to the greatness of this game is that it really has never been replicated. I think it has the most convincing 3D on the 3DS that I've seen. I haven't played every 3DS game, but it took, again, what I thought was a gimmick and made it an integral part of the game, and actually made the game more enjoyable through that technology. The later games the later game in the series, 3D World, is a great game in its own right, but it loses something without the visual aesthetic that the 3D can create. Still a ton of fun to play, but it doesn't give you that sense of diving into a Mario level, a classic Mario level, and seeing that level in a new way. Now, I think in a lot of ways, this game represents the best of what the 3DS was as a system. And I'm going to do a little companion video to this about the 3DS in general. But, this game came out at a time when the 3DS was seen as kind of a flop. They had the whole sort of pricing issue, where I think it started at like $250 and they dropped it to $170, $180, something like that, after 6 months on the market, and the early adopters were angry and they had to give that sort of loyalty program to them. And then this game came out in that window, and I think showed players what the 3DS could do, what it could aspire to be from a design and creativity standpoint. And I think the nice thing is the 3DS actually lived up to the high bar that this game set, even though I'm not sure that any game, again, really did 3D this way and really used the technology in such a creative way to really revitalize a classic series that you would think, and it doesn't need, classic Mario does not need to be reinvented. It is, those games stand the test of time, and yet this game tried that and succeeded. So if you grew up with the originals, if you love the originals, this game allows you to experience them, I think, in a new way. It's something that Nintendo hadn't done before, I would argue, and really hasn't done since. It is an example of Nintendo at its absolute best, and it is a must-play. And the best part is, this game is really, really cheap, which doesn't happen a lot with Nintendo games. I saw this on eBay recently for, $15, $20. At that price, if you have a 3DS and you haven't played this, or maybe you just want to pick up a 3DS for $50, $60, this is the game to get. It is an amazing experience, and it's a love letter to all of us who grew up with the classic Mario games.